My guest today is Jenn Todling, an author, speaker, executive coach, and an adjunct instructor at the University of Denver. A former Big Four audit partner with 20 plus years in professional services and an ICF certified coach for over a decade, she helps clients express their soul in work and life. In today's episode, Jenn and I talk about her memoir, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet. Welcome to Lifeology.
Thanks so much, James. It's so great to be here.
I am excited. This is your first show we're talking about your book, and so I'm very honored to be at the beginning parts of your journey. So many things that I know about you. We're aligned in a lot of ways, and so I'm looking forward to talking with you and talking about how you're able to come to this place where we are today. So, a person of dance. How long did you study dance?
So it's interesting. I think I was just born a dancer, but I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
professionally trained until I was
Mm-hmm.
14, which is pretty late
Mm.
in life. But I was like dancing in my living room with my shag carpet to Madonna as a teenager, like maybe 10 years old. Star Search. I don't know if you remember Star Search, but
Yeah, of course I
choreographing
do.
the Star Search moves.
Yes.
And so it was just like in me. And then at 14, I actually found a ballet company and I joined a pre-professional dance studio and became a principal ballet dancer.
Wow.
So I had,
Wow.
a lot of fun in my youth. 15 hours a week in that dance studio was pretty powerful. So I think I just was born a dancer. Is how I'm going to describe it.
Well, it's interesting because well, to my limited knowledge, but most people who are principal dancers, they've studied their whole life, and so you had an innate talent, and then you started at 14. Wow, to be able to do that and become a principal, that is fantastic.
Yeah, and I look back because I had to remind myself of the timeline to fact check myself a little bit because I think it happened like a year, maybe 18 months after I started. But I think I just had this passion and this drive, and I was really committed, and I loved it. And I wasn't the most naturally, like I didn't have the best feet to dance on point. Like nothing was perfect in terms of my body necessarily, but I just had that passion for it. And so it definitely was an outlet in my youth to support me and having fun and an escape a little bit from sometimes the challenges of life, even then.
Yes, exactly. The expressive arts has always been, people are always told that a person is either logical or they're either really creative. And so it sounds like you're able to create the intersect between both aspects to be more of a fulfilled person, or more of a well-rounded person. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think I've embraced that as I've gotten older, but I definitely struggled with that at points in my life because I do feel like I have both and they're not maybe exactly equal, but they're both very dominant. And so learning how to integrate that, I think, has been something I've really embraced, especially as I've gotten older, to realize there's a lot of value there.
Yes, because I think sometimes when we pigeonhole different aspects of our life, or even cherry pick different aspects of it, we don't fully accept that, then we can't fully show up in all areas of our life. I always tell people, we look at life. People who can't see my hands right now, they're separated about a foot apart. So that's within my hands is who we are. And so if we cherry pick one side of us and say this is who I am, and I show the world that, well, that's fine. But if you don't accept the other parts of you that are either more the shadow side of you, which doesn't mean it's bad, it just means parts that are just more internal, that you haven't really expressed, or the part you don't like. But we're all of that within that spectrum. And so if we don't fully embrace that and integrate that and accept it, then we're never going to fully be able to grow and become the person we should become or could become, because we're limiting ourselves. And so to be able to accept that, I know who I am and I know who I am not. And so with that, I can fully love that about myself and really focus on the things of how do I allow my whole self to become the person I want to become as well.
Yeah, and I love what you said there. I had an executive coach once tell me I struggled with sort of the black and white, like it's either or, right? I'm a dancer or I'm kind of corporate technical. And he kind of said, what does it look like to be both and? And I've really tried to embrace that of like, I can be very creative, I can be, very expressive, and I can be highly analytical and technical. And it doesn't have to be a choice.
In psychology, we call that a dialectic. And so everyone has been on my show for like, oh my God, James, stop talking about the dialectic. And so the dialectics, because when it comes to grammar, so when we always say, if you have a phrase first and use the word but, the conjunction, but, that means it negates the first part. But if you put and, it allows for both to be true. So when I've had people who text me and then they'll write and then capitalize, and I'm like, yes, you understand that you can have more than one. So another way to think about that as well is when it comes to our emotions. So for example, if I'm at a funeral, I'm really sad and I'm crying, but I think of a funny memory, well, I start to laugh and I'm feeling joy, but I'm still sad. And so the point is we can experience so many different types of emotions, which also means so many different types of positions in our body, or interests in our body. All that is truly important. And so to allow that yourself to fully embrace that creates a whole new idea of like, oh my gosh, I can do more than just one thing. So I'm really glad your coach was able to teach you that. And of course, when you embody that, you're able to instruct your clients as well.
Exactly. Like more than one thing can be true at the same time, and
Yes.
sitting with that. And I have a 6-year-old, and so I try and teach her that too, right? You can
Mm,
be sad about this and, excited that you're in this situation as well. So kind of
yeah.
holding space for both.
Now, from the dancing, then you went more the corporate route, though, correct?
Yeah, so I ended up, I danced probably until I was 20, and then I
Hmm.
ended up moving to California. I got
Hmm.
married,
Hmm.
and then my life kind of shifted, right? And I went to I finished college,
Hmm.
and then I
Hmm.
started in the corporate realm, and I stopped dancing. To be
Hmm.
honest with you, I
Hmm.
had a decade
Yeah.
where I didn't dance, and there were situations that I was navigating that made that challenging.
Yeah.
But I did definitely shift into kind of the more corporate space, and so I was very much in that technical,
Hmm.
analytical
Hmm.
brain. And had kind of, I don't know if abandon's the right word, but I had stepped away from those
Hmm.
creative outlets
Hmm.
for a decade.
Hmm. Yeah, and if we can circle back to that for 1 second,
Yeah.
because I have something similar when it comes to I didn't. For those who don't know that I'm a composer as well, I took probably about. Actually, I don't know the timeline myself. I don't want to fact check myself. There's quite a period of time where I didn't play the piano, and so when I made a decision, I made a profound decision in my life, and all of a sudden, when I stepped away from a relationship, I sat down and played my piano, and I hadn't played in a while, and I closed my eyes and I played, and so the piece, the title of my first album, Consolation, that is what I wrote. And so I just sat down and I played it and it just came out. And so it's so
Wow.
amazing to see how when you're creative and you stifle it, the rebound effect is that it comes out so much like, oh my gosh, I can't stop, but it's just interesting to see that. So when I know a little bit about your backstory, we'll cover it just real briefly, but when you're 20 years old, I know you moved to California, you were dating someone. It was a quick marriage as far as a quick, you've known the person
Courtship.
very briefly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Courtship. You got married. Out of curiosity, where you were living at home and then the love bombing that happened. So love
Yeah.
bombing for people who don't know, love bombing for people who don't know is someone who says all these really hyper romantic things and change the world. Like I'll take you out all these places and I'll create the world for you. And you get so embodied, like, oh my God, I love this. And then you get there and literally those bombs explode. And so
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
doesn't come to pass. So because I obviously, there were so many people can relate with that. I mean, I can relate with that as
Yeah.
well. When you moved to California and you did get married, was it to leave your home? Was it your first time moving away? How was that for you?
Yeah, so I was actually living, so I was a freshman. I had taken a gap year after high school. I just needed a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a break. And so I was an older freshman
Mm-hmm.
at the University of Colorado. So I was actually living in the dorms, but I
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes from my childhood home. So I was still nearby. And part of the challenge of my youth was my parents divorced when I was 12. I was the oldest of 4 kids, and
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of took on a lot of
Yeah.
responsibilities. And
Yeah.
so there and some of those were still continuing at that time, and so I think there was a part of me that just wanted to have an adventure, and I was excited to, I was looking at colleges in Europe, and I'm like, let's go have an adventure. And so yes, when this love bombing happened and all these beautiful ideas of,
Mm-hmm.
adventure and excitement, and
Yeah.
I think that appealed to me because it was like, ooh, I can kind of go and try something different. And so there definitely was an appeal that put me in
Yeah.
a situation where I wasn't even in love with the person,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that, but I couldn't like express it to myself at the time. I was 20,
Yeah.
I was young.
Yeah.
And so that brought me to California, and then, things evolved as they did. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that search for adventure and sort of a little bit of a, not escape, but just a
Yeah.
freedom
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
some of the
Exactly.
childhood caregiving was like, I was looking for that.
Of course. I mean, especially if you're, if the oldest of four, and there's whether parents mean to or not, but there's always going to be a sense of parentifying that happens for a child. So parentifying means that a child who is gets put in a parental situation or feels that they have to become the parent, it often doesn't allow for them to enjoy their childhood. So whether, we could have the best parents, but that can still happen for a child to feel like they're the parent in some ways. And so for you, I mean, it makes sense. You'd want to get away. I mean, you're in Denver, you've been there the whole your life. I have something kind of similar to that. I remember when before I left, came here to Florida to start Lifeology. I in my own life, I was like, I'm feeling stifled. I was really successful in my private practice and all that, but I was like, there's a part of me that I haven't done in a while. I haven't, I haven't been as creative as I'd like to be. And so I made a decision to leave a relationship. And then from there, 3 years, it took me to really culminate to see, well, what do I want to do? And so when I left that relationship for that 3 year period of time, that's when I started writing again. But what's interesting is kind of on the other side of that says, I'm coming here to Florida. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start something new. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something different and, body everything. So here I am getting ready to go. And a couple months prior to that, I had met somebody, got love bombed. And so I went to to London, and I was there for a month, and I was like, yes, I'm going to come live here. So I went home, and I had already sold my place, or just about ready to sell my place. That was already in the plan. But so just as I was ready to go come back to London, the night before, I got an email from the person, an email, not a call. It says, yeah, this isn't going to work out. So I'm like, I was literally going to fly here to London. I mean, everything works out well. And so I enacted my first plan. I came here to Florida, and here we are. 10 years later, actually. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. So, but the point is that when love bombs happening, something new is something that comes to us. It feels so neat. And I think the difficulty for you and myself, we can be more regimented. But when we have something like that, that's new. It's like, oh my gosh, this could happen. This is something I really want. And so when we get lost in that, we don't hear that inner voice that says, wait a minute, just slow down a bit. Sometimes things can go awry, but life always has a great way of circling back to where we are today. So for you to go to that situation and you stifle the dance, though, was that because of where you were in life? You weren't feeling fulfilled. So all that just shut down.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a couple things. I mean, I continued college and I did try and take some dance classes.
Mm-hmm.
My spouse wasn't super supportive of that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think I kind of conceded, feeling like, okay, maybe this isn't really that
Mm-hmm.
important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then our situation got a little complex because he ended up becoming chronically ill and disabled. And so I was then in like another caregiving swirl. So my
Yeah.
adventure
Yeah.
turned into a caregiving swirl. And so it
Ah.
wasn't really on my radar then, because I was just trying to survive, right? Caregive and then also work full time to support us. And so my priorities sort of shifted. And as I got, towards the end of that relationship, I started to kind of have outlets again and say, hey, I need to actually focus on myself. And then it was a little bit more yoga and Pilates, but just
Mm-hmm.
some movement,
Mm-hmm.
because I think just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
moving your body, there's
Yes.
so much wisdom there. And I wasn't really even moving my body regularly in that time period. So it wasn't an intentional decision per se,
Sure.
but it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of happened. And then all of a sudden it wasn't a part of my life anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So people who can't see me again, I have a water bottle here, and so what's important is when we give out, when we experience life, we should always give out of our reserve. No, excuse me, we always give out of our abundance, not out of our reserve. And so when people can see me, I'm holding this water bottle up, and my bottle should be full. And once it's full, then I can do the things for other people that can be helpful as far as offer them advice or just be their friend or just do the things that is going to pull away from me. So it's important to figure out what is that for you to hold, to be able to refill your cup, if you will. And so if we don't have those creative outlets, if we don't have those things that nurture us and bring us joy and bring us just a sense of contentment and fulfillment, then yes, we'll continue to give out, and there's nothing left for us. And that's how we find burnout happen. That's how we find all these things that people like, I hate my life, or just I have no hope. It's because you haven't filled your cup. And so for you, you're able to do that. So walk me through the first class you did, or first when you decided to dance again. What was that experience like for you?
Well, it was interesting because so after my divorce, I moved to New York City, and
Uh,
kind of like you explained, it was like my Renaissance era. It was like 3 years. I'm
uh,
like, I'm gonna try all the things, right? I was ready to just try all the things, Italian lessons and writing class, like all the things. And
yes.
I remember like my first few days, I was walking in Midtown near the Empire State Building, and there was like this chalkboard sign that said "dance sport." And I looked up in the window and you could see like ballroom dancers, kind of
Uh,
the shadows, and I had watched Dancing with the Stars, and there was a part of me that was really curious about partnership, and I had never
mm-hmm,
danced in partnership before. It
interesting.
always had been ballet or jazz. And I was like, this is interesting. And so there was just this tug that was curious. And I resisted it because I was nervous and out of my comfort
Mm-hmm,
zone, right? That was
mm-hmm.
different for me. And then I got a Groupon, and I was like, oh, I can do like $100 a month for unlimited dance classes. I'm like, oh, this is a sign. And so I signed up, and I remember going into that studio the first time. I mean, like completely out of my element. I had bought dance shoes, at the local store, and I'm like, all right, what am I doing? And I almost turned around. I'm like, no, this isn't for me. Like, this is too much.
Yeah.
And then I ended up in this sort of beginner's Argentine tango class with the owner of the
Oh
studio,
wow.
and he kind of pulled me in to demo the first move, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm here. But it, when you're in a partnership and an embrace, like there
Mm-hmm.
was something that
Mm.
turned on for me in a like a light that had been dimmed was starting to
Yes. Yes.
reignite. And the physical touch too, right? Like your cheek to cheek,
Yes.
your chest to chest. Like the tango is a very close dance.
Yes.
And so I just started to feel some of my spirit come back to life.
Mm.
And
You felt safe too.
I felt safe. Yeah. And so that was a journey, right? It was like an ebb and flow as I
Yeah.
continued, but it became this, I mean, I became addicted. I'll be honest with you. I left my corporate job like every day at 5:30. I ran through, Times Square, and I was at that dance studio for like 4 hours a night, 5 days a week, like dance party, dance styles. Like
Yeah.
it was amazing. But I just remember that first moment being like, oh,
Yeah.
something is turning on that I forgot was there.
Yes.
It
Yes.
just kind of had
Yes.
disappeared.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. You just use a word here. This is too much, or this is too much. I can't do this. And I don't know if that's obviously how you felt at the moment, but even using those words, sometimes when we are in relationships, we're told something. We're too much of this. Or you need to be more of this. And so it's interesting to just hear if that was your inner dialogue for you to say this is too much. It's almost like that part of you that was, your more stifled self was telling you that, I can't. This is too much, or you'll be too much, or this isn't for us. And so I'm so proud of you for what that's worth, to that you pressed through that and you went through that and to experience that. What's also interesting is that when we have the physical touch, so physical touch is incredibly important, but just having that, your body creates oxytocin. So oxytocin is one of the hormone, it's like the feel good hormone, or the social hormone rather. So that's what we feel when we can trust people, we feel supported, we feel safe. And so to have that, to do something also when you haven't done the tango before, I mean, there's so much there. So if you felt safe, you felt seen, you felt like this is okay. And so I'm so glad to hear how that expression was for you. But I think there was the part that I always like to ask people is the visceral part, like what was the exact moment. And so to hear yours is just pretty profound.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that there were a lot of lessons then that I learned. Like for me, it also
Mm-hmm.
was, especially when you're dancing, most ballroom dances, like more like a tango or ballroom. I mean, for the follower, or in my case,
Mm-hmm.
as a woman, I was dancing backwards, right?
Oh,
And
oh,
so
wow.
you're dancing backwards, right? And so you have to really like learn to listen to your partner and let go. And that was
Mm-hmm.
really hard for me too, right? It was this
Mm-hmm.
control, and I had to learn in a safe space, learn to let
Yeah.
go and trust myself. And that was a very interesting experience.
So your partner though also reflected that side of you, that's the kind of like the foundation piece of you. And as you were merging those two, your inner self and your yourself together, rather, if that person represented that, it's so interesting to see the integration of that as far as learning how to trust yourself again, learning how to navigate the world, and learning how to be like, I'm okay. And so yeah, I didn't really think about the imagery of that, but yes, I can see how profound that would be as well. Now, but the cool part though is you had your creative outlet when you were doing the auditing, or in that
Yeah.
field. And so when you started to see that again, tell me how did that affected your work?
Yeah, it's interesting because it actually made me better at my job. And I didn't
Okay.
really like think about that like intuitively. I was just looking for fun, right? I'm like, I'm looking to
Yeah.
live. But what I realized is, it turned on a different side of my brain that
Uh,
I wasn't used to activating. So I was really comfortable activating the analytical, the logical, kind of my doer brain, right? Like all the
uh,
tasks I needed to complete. But this opened up sort of my insight and able to connect the dots. And as an auditor, you need to be able to like be in the technical, but you also have to step away and say, what am I missing? Does this data make sense?
mm-hmm.
And so it turned on that part of my brain so that I was more easily able to make connections and have different insights in my job. And
Mm-hmm.
it was really fun to integrate. Like I have a fun story where I was working really late on a deadline at work, and I had this opportunity to do. They did a dance talent show on Broadway through my company, and I
Mm.
was at the Broadway dance studio performing the Paso Doble. I'm like, hold on a second, I got to go like spend an hour doing the Paso Doble, then I'll come back and work till midnight. And it was just like this funny moment of like, okay, now I can get back into it. But I was like, playing in both and that was
Yeah, yeah.
really powerful.
Transitioning into your book, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet. What is this book about?
So this book chronicles my story and it chronicles my journey. So it covers sort of my transition to California and my first marriage and what that
Mm-hmm.
looked like. And then it
Mm-hmm.
highlights the, transition to New York City and rediscovering
Mm-hmm.
myself and then ultimately, being open to love again. And so I would say in one sentence, it's celebrating the transformative power of dance for me.
Wow. Yes. What's different? What's the same about the person who was at the beginning of the memoir versus now for you?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, here's one distinction that I think is really, really valuable. And if readers take nothing away
Mm-hmm.
than this, I think it's a win. Is my 20-year-old self knew what I wanted and
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to do, but I didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
courage to act on it. my
Yeah.
35-year-old self at the end of the book knew and decided to take action on it. So I think it's really
Mm.
about when we're tuning into our intuition, finding the courage to honor it. That was the growth that I experienced, and dance was a component that helped me get there,
Mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that's the arc of my journey
Mm.
of really owning that for myself.
Yeah. And so when you fully embrace that, through the dance, that's how how do I say this? It's when you fully accepted that and realize that, we always get to the journey where we're supposed to be when we truly listen to ourselves. Um, and so for you to experience life now, I bet you can't even imagine what it would have been like if you'd stayed in that previous marriage. And once again, nothing about the person, just the dynamic.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes it feels like a different universe. I'm like, did that really
Mm-hmm.
happen? Did that really happen? It
Yeah.
feels like forever ago. And so I think part of this book for me is also celebrating and honoring the fact that it did happen, and I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
be ashamed of the decisions I made.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Yeah, of
learned
course, of
from
course not.
them. And so I think there was a journey in there, but absolutely it feels like a universe ago. Like I have a hard time even comprehending.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
I went through all of that. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. But I always tell people it's like, so think of like life events like jigsaw puzzle pieces. We've all done a jigsaw puzzle. So every event in our life, sometimes we're like, I don't like this. I don't like, where does this even go? It doesn't make sense. But when you put all the pieces together, and that just means with time and different life events happen, when you put it together, you're like, that makes sense. You're like, I see how this fits with me now. I learned this lesson, so now I can enjoy it here. So sometimes we're like, I wish I didn't go through certain things. And of course, hopefully we never go through them again. But we can take those as situations and say there's a lesson that comes out of it. Legacy always happens through grief or through change. And so the legacy simply is what do I do with this? How do I remember this? But if we get stuck in a situation and that situation becomes our identity, in other words, that I'm a divorced person, or I'm the brokenhearted person, or I'm the sick person, whatever that is, if that's how we define ourselves, well, then we get stuck. Our mentality gets stuck in that time frame. So when we realize that's just a situation, then we can allow that we absorb that and say that what came out of that, and that's our choice. And so misery, trouble is inevitable, but misery is optional. And so we can take that situation to grow from it. And so retrospectively, just like your memoir, you look back and say, this is how all those pieces fit together for me to be the person I am today. And so that's why we can embrace everything that's happened to us. Don't like it, but we can embrace it.
I love that analogy. I think that's really helpful.
What's next for you?
Yeah, so my book is published and I'm celebrating that. And I'm also just looking for ways to contribute to help others sort of find ways to
Mm-hmm.
tap into
Mm-hmm.
their own creative
Mm-hmm.
expression through my
Mm-hmm.
executive coaching. And so I look forward to continuing that journey.
Yeah, yeah. Now, so a lot of times when people write a memoir, it chronicles sometimes. Well, I am generalizing here. So a lot of times when people write memoirs, they're older in life, and so you wrote yours at your current age, which I think is fantastic because there's so many life lessons there. So I'm curious to see if there'd be like 5 volumes of this, that the next decade, or however many decades of life. Do you see yourself writing more?
Started my second one. I've gone back and forth on like whether I'm ready because I'm in it right now. I'm like, I think I need a
Yeah,
little distance to get the life lessons
yeah.
out of it. But I am in the middle of my second. I'm halfway through my second one, which kind of is like the
Nice.
next chapter. So
Yeah,
I
that's
do
awesome.
envision there being more. I'm just trying to figure out like which lane am I in because it's a
Yeah,
lot.
exactly. What I think I think it is hard at times because we don't like, I'm learning lessons here, but then we're like, but maybe there's another lesson I can add to that. But there's so many things that happen. It's like, how do I stop and just say I'm only going to focus on this particular part of it?
Like I'm
I
in that
totally get
part
it.
right now of my journey. I'm like, what is the ending? Where does it end? I don't know.
Sometimes when I wrote my book, I was actually in a position where the chapter I was writing was on radical acceptance. Radical acceptance means you accept the facts as they are. Doesn't mean you like it. Doesn't mean you prove it. Doesn't mean you want to go through it again, but you accept the facts as they are. So what do you do with it? And so I remember as I was writing that chapter, because my book, you can read it and you don't have to read it chapter by chapter. But so I was actually writing the first chapter, which I was written like, could have been like 20th chapter. But I was writing at that moment and I was like, I'm in this situation. So I was like, I am in an environment where I'm overwhelmed and struggling with some things. However, I'm excited because I'm going to experience, I know who I'm going to be once this situation's over. So to sit in the discomfort of the situation, but the dialectic, but then being excited because something's going to come out of it. To sit with those two things is such a powerful way because you can take the situation, the energy that could be sadness or whatever the energy could be, but you capitalize and do something that's creative. And so you take what you can't do and turn it into something you can do. And so in that's where, so many lessons come out. So wherever you are in this journey, whether that relates or not, the point is there's joy that can come with the trial and the tribulation because you have the choice of who you're going to be when you're on the other side of it.
I love that. Yeah, my tea bag today said uncertainty sits in a place where everything is possible. And I was like,
Oh.
okay. That's pretty powerful.
I'm on board with that. It is. Jenn Todling, it has been such an absolute pleasure having you on my show today. You and I could talk forever. If my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you and to purchase your book, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet, where would they find all this information online?
Yeah, the best way is my website, jenntodling.com, and that's Jenn with 2 N's.
Awesome. My viewers and listeners also know that if you can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I'll connect you with Jenn Todling and her book, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet. Jenn, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, James. It's been a pleasure.